He's calling me to her.
That's not a joke.
Alright, so this is gonna be a little different tonight. I call this meeting of the April 6th, 2021 Planning Board to order. This is kind of strange, I'm calling it to order because we have elections tonight. This is our organizational meeting, so we'll be doing elections for chair and vice chair. So as soon as we get that out of the way, I will hand the gavel over to the chair. But before we get started, if we'll do the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And we'll have a moment of reflection. So, this time, we will start the nominations for chair. I have any nominations? Nominations for chair. Yes, sir.
Did you want to add that as 1B?
Yes, sir.
So we need a motion on that, right?
So moved.
I'll second it.
All in favor? So we'll open nominations for chair of the planning board. Don't everybody speak it.
I'll do whatever y'all want me to do. Somebody else wants it, it's fine. I don't mind staying on.
Oh, not particularly, I would do it if nobody else wanted it, but I don't want that now.
Are we do this, and are we going to go to,
Jonathan Thomas for.
Okay. So I have a motion for John Thomas to be chair. Is there a second? All right, got a second. Any
Second.
other nominations? Okay. Hearing no other nominations, all in favor of Jonathan as chair? Well, actually, we should ask first, Jonathan, are you willing to serve as chair?
Sure.
Okay. So, there being no other nominations, all in favor of Jonathan Thomas as chairman of the Union County Planning Board, say aye.
Aye.
No.
Any opposed? The chair of the planning board. And,
Well,
what about vice chair?
thank you.
yeah, since he's the chairman, I'm gonna let him
Okay.
go ahead and do those nominations. And
Oh, my goodness. All right, well, I guess we're now looking for nominations for vice chair. Do we have any nominations?
Will you take it? Will you take it? What?
I'll nominate Don Fisher for vice chair. Do you want the job?
I'll do it with you. I'll help you.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Congratulations.
Thank you.
All right. Voting members, looks like we have 4 voting members this evening for item 2. And that's a quorum, correct?
that is the
Yes.
quorum, just barely.
Just barely. And everyone here is able, so. Move forward with item number 3, additions or deletions to the agenda. Do we have any?
We did the 1B.
The 1B,
1B was the elections. That's all it had to be.
okay, well, have that noted. 1B. Gonna have to keep me on my toes, Don. I appreciate that. All right, move forward with that unless we need a vote on closing the table to additions or deletions.
So moved.
All right. All in favor? All right, approval of the agenda. Everyone had a chance to review item 4, the approval of the agenda. Any motion to approve?
I make a motion to approve it as with the amendment.
All right,
1B.
motion to approve with amendment 1B by Don Fisher, second. Pat Harrison. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you. The next one is going to be item 5, approval of minutes. The item 5A, March 2021 minutes, please review and let me know if we have a motion to approve or any amendments.
I make a motion we accept the minutes as it has been presented.
Do we have a second?
Yes.
Second by Louis. All right, motion to approve or vote to approve? All in favor? Any opposed? Thank you. All right, item 6, number Union County 2050 Plan Review and Recommendation. Bjorn.
Evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board. This is same presentation from the March meeting where we introduced the topic of the results of the Union County 2050 Comprehensive Plan Development. And what's been asked of you over the past month is to review the plan, come up with any amendments that you may have if the plan is deficient in some way, either things that are recommended in it that you think shouldn't make it to the county commission, or things that were omitted and should be added to this document to go to the county commission. If you make a recommendation tonight for something other than what was recommended by the citizens-led coordinating committee, then we'll have 2 documents that get presented. You'll have the results of what the coordinating committee completed, as well as the recommendation of the planning board, and they'll hear it sometime in the near future. So going back to the overall process, we were guided by a vision that is laid out here. This was approved in the spring of 2020, and some of the notable things were that it included clearly communicated plans so that it wasn't a surprise to the public or the municipalities or the property owners regarding what was recommended for specific areas of the county. That capacity would be increased to address specific issues such as education or transportation. That there were recommendations for high-density residential, retail, and employment in designated areas. That there would be accessibility between some of those land uses. That on the flip side of where development would be is emphasizing rural character outside of where we have utilities, which is where density naturally would want to go to take advantage of that capacity. Recognition and support of agriculture as a key industry, and community connections for arts, agritourism, and parks and recreation. In terms of the scenario that was identified that implements that vision, it was called the advancement scenario. We had 3 scenarios that were put before the public. One was essentially a status quo. The second was just upgrading the development regulations. And the third was to increase the capacity by committing the county to increased programs to address issues of common concern. This scenario includes a revised land use map, upgraded regulations to address the impacts of development, and some new programs, as well as some new resources to pay for those programs, specifically transportation, a proposed quarter-cent sales tax, well inspections of new homes. This isn't necessarily something new, but it puts things in the right order to say that the well inspections must be complete before the certificate of occupancy is granted in order to ensure that there's maximum opportunity for the buyers of these homes to be aware of the status of the drinking water. continue the initiatives to address unsafe drinking water, including the short-line water extensions, and to create a rural water authority to help compete for grants and low-interest loans to extend water lines, address litter through a task force to identify future strategies to address that issue, and then lastly, commitment resources to expanding broadband internet, which is not just a rural issue, but some of the older parts of our municipalities as well. In terms of what actually made it into the plan based off of that scenario, this occurred last fall, and you can see in here that there are some red and oranges where they didn't make it in. And this is a holistic assessment based on the subcommittees that have various focus areas such as environmental, business, infrastructure, agriculture, or citizens' perspective. But the coordinating committee on the far right is the one that had the ultimate say in what was recommended for inclusion in this plan. And it required a 2/3 level of support. So they were strongly supported if they made it into the plan. Some of the things that did not make it into the plan were municipal requests for proactive water and sewer extensions to assist municipal planning efforts in downtowns or office parks, as well as funding recreation projects, also through that quarter-cent sales tax, not a second one, but just additional eligibility off of that quarter-cent sales tax, and also a well rehabilitation grant program to assist property owners to upgrade their wells to address unsafe drinking water. The other recommendations did make it in regarding new regulations on development, as well as the Rural Water Authority, the Litter Task Force, the transportation funding, and the broadband internet. So this was developed by November of last year, and then we went out for public comment. And honestly, it wasn't a rousing success. Generally, there wasn't seen as enough consideration of the impacts of development, particularly traffic, in the western part of the county. And also in Stallings and Indian Trail, there was some concern that the quarter-cent sales tax wasn't going to be available for any potential light rail extension into Union County from Mecklenburg County. So we worked on responses to those questions put before the coordinating committee and put those back out to the public and said, well, if these changes were made, what's your response to the comprehensive plan and its recommendations? The first one was about the transition zones, to take in nearly all the land between municipalities in western Union County. The response was that, yes, some expansion of the transition zones makes sense, but generally speaking, the perspective is that the county has a role to play in land use planning, and they're not going to cede the authority to the municipalities for all of western Union County. The second one was about the impacts of growth on traffic corridors, particularly traffic corridors that have already been identified and funded for widenings, but the widenings haven't occurred yet. I'm talking about Providence Road, the Railroad Extension, Monroe Road. These are corridors that are already congested, unsafe, so why would we approve more development on those corridors before the widenings have taken place? It's a reasonable request from the public. The response from the coordinating committee was that they agree, but they didn't want to turn down all development. They wanted to focus on development that had peak hour impacts. That would be primarily residential, but some certain resident or non-residential uses, such as say daycare, would also be impacted on these corridors for Providence Road. Because if you're adding traffic at noon or 9 p.m., you're not the reason why that road is congested. If you're adding at 7:30 in the morning going north or 5 p.m. in the evening going south, you're the reason why that road is being widened. So being a little nuanced in that distinction of the impact of traffic on those corridors was a recommendation. And they also recognized that it's not just Union County. This would have to be a multi-jurisdictional effort, particularly up and down Providence Road, because you have Weddington, Marvin, and Waxhaw that all are approving developments as well. The next one is about types of land use, talking about multifamily, high-density residential in western Union County. The request was to say this is inconsistent with the land use patterns in this part of the county. It should all be large lot, single-family residential. The response was that we've already reduced it in the proposed land use map by 95%. There's 95% less high-density residential land in the new map compared to the one that already exists. There is a place for some high-density residential. It's designated on multi-lane corridors at key intersections, and the coordinating committee said because they have made the recommendation for the linkage between those rezonings for that high-density residential and the provision of those widened roads, they feel that they've addressed the key criticism of high-density development, which is that the roads can't support it. So they reaffirmed the land use map recommendations, which does include some high-density residential recommendations. The last one was about the use of the quarter-cent sales tax. There were some comments to refine and clarify the eligible uses of that quarter-cent sales tax because it just said transportation projects, and the question was, well, could it be used for public transportation? And the response of the coordinating committee was that, one, they didn't have enough information about what the light rail would cost and what the benefits of it would be, and secondly, they knew it would be very expensive and there wasn't enough money to fund both the needed transportation road projects as well as committing to the light rail. So their recommendation was to not spend any of the quarter-cent revenues on transit. This was, at every phase of the process, vetted with the public. Probably 1,000 people provided their feedback through any one of the phases of the process. There were monthly committee meetings that were all open to the public. The public notices went out for all of them. There was a comment period at each of the meetings. The 3 phases of the plan that went out to the public had interactive online maps, heavy social media presence, shared with the municipalities, posted on our website, and emailed out to our sunshine list of interested residents. We presented to municipalities, homeowner associations, community groups, and we had drop-in comment period meetings for all 3 of the phases. The last phase, when we had this revised plan sent out to the public for an extended 3-week comment period in January into early February, was in December into January, was very successful. You can see here we had over 250 people complete the survey, and less than 6% were dissatisfied with the results. Not everyone was completely happy, but only a handful of people responded that no, this plan, they can't support it even with these changes. In terms of the participation, we had much better geographic representation from around the county. This is the townships in the county. Monroe, Sandy Ridge, and Vance have approximately the same townships, so we always benchmark them against each other. And Sandy Ridge and Monroe were very close to each other. Vance was a bit lower, but the other townships, much lower populations, so their number of responses generally in line with their number of residences, or with the number of residents. In terms of the tenure living in the county, we always worry about, are we getting people who have lived here forever or people who just moved here yesterday? I think we had a good balance between people who have moved here and people who have lived here for a generation or longer. And this is the map that I think a lot of people care about the most. What does it mean? This map includes the gray, the green, light green with the diagonal hashes, the transition zones, which reflect a lot of the islands of unincorporated Union County that frankly, we at the staff level and you at the planning board level see a lot of development proposals for that require rezonings, and they result in a lot of municipal feedback, often against the proposed developments, either because it's inconsistent with what they would want or it's outside of their town limits and is just going to result in a hodgepodge of development patterns, which was one of the goals of our vision, was to create more consistent development patterns. So these areas, they're going to be residential. They're not on major roads. They are just a matter of what development pattern they need to be developed under if the property owners choose to develop their land. And how this would work is the county commission would pass a resolution saying it's the policy of Union County to not approve rezonings in these infill areas per our comprehensive plan. We would direct the property owners and developers to apply for annexation and rezoning into the appropriate municipality and develop under their regulations. And over time, this would fill in these donut holes. But if people want to develop under the existing zoning, we would certainly not stand in their way, and they could develop according to what's allowed under their current zoning.
Bjorn,
Yes.
so everything at one point was Union County, and as the towns incorporated, they took their land, but they left open land? Is that how the donut holes came about?
I think it's probably a little bit of everything. I mean, like Monroe has probably been in existence as a municipality as long as Union County's been in existence. But, you know, the specific annexations, incorporations, it really depends on the era that the municipalities were created. Sometimes they were a lot more liberal in terms of the flexibility and authority given the municipalities to annex land. Sometimes it was voluntary on behalf of the developer. Sometimes it's based on the policy and willingness of the county to allow development. If we always said no, then they would be compelled to a greater degree to go into the municipality. So it's, on any one parcel, there could be a different reason why it is or isn't inside a municipality.
Thanks.
Bjorn, refresh my memory. The citizens of a municipality, whether it's Weddington, Marvin, wherever, were they able to participate in this, or was it just county, rural county people?
You mean on the committees or just to comment?
Comments.
Oh, absolutely, they could comment, because even if you're inside a municipality, you're still a resident of Union County.
The reason I ask, I might have missed it. You had the list of all the different places that you had responses from. I didn't see Waxhaw on there.
Those are townships.
Those are townships.
Yeah, so
Thank you.
Waxhaw,
Okay, I
could
got
be-
it mixed up.
yeah.
You clarified it. Thank
yeah,
you.
Waxhaw is actually straddles 2 townships,
Yeah.
so.
Thank you, no
But
problem.
yeah, we broke it down on the township
No
level.
problem, okay.
Any other questions about the land use map? Okay, so here we are, and these dates probably are gonna slip to the right regarding how they get to the Board of Commissioners. We suspect we're gonna need to do some 2-on-1s with them to get them up to speed with the plan recommendations. But you heard it last month, you're here tonight on April 6th, where you have the opportunity to make a recommendation to the county commission. After that, we'll present to them and say, here's what we've done. If you want, you could direct us to schedule a public hearing, and we'll do so. The public will say whatever they'll say. The commissioners will then do whatever they're going to do. They could deny the plan, they could accept the plan and just not approve it, or they could, and then work on something else, or they could say, yep, we like this, and we'll approve it, maybe with some tweaks, maybe directly as recommended, but that's up to them, and we'll work at their direction to make that happen. So at this point, you know, I'm happy to answer any questions you may have. Lee's obviously been a part of the process the whole time as well, working under his direction, and any kind of changes you want to make, you know, you make a motion that strategy whatever is deleted from the plan, that's fine. If you say that strategy Y that wasn't included, you think should be included, you can make that motion. But we're happy to help facilitate this however works for you.
Bjorn, first off, thank you. I know this is a 15-minute presentation, but this took tremendous amount of time and hours, and we do appreciate all your efforts in this. If there's no immediate questions from the board, I would make the recommendation.
I would have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Somewhere in this mess that I was looking at it, the discussion of the wells was put off. But Jonathan and I said they've done a little research on that, and we find, and my understanding is that you have some wells that out there, they can contaminate, especially when you have so much, you know, ground being moved around, drilling irrigation wells, that sort of thing. You upset the infrastructure, you can pick up a little arsenic and stuff going in wells. My concern was that, well, you know, some poor guy's got himself a little piece of property, he's got, lives in a well with his family over there, and there's some construction and it's somewhere nearby, it upsets the ground and stuff, and his well's contaminated and he doesn't know it. He's got young children who will eat arsenic or whatever they're eating. Then we looked at we went to see the lady who works for y'all, and one of the things, remember, she was talking about just for check, just a simple test for arsenic is $72. I mean, what did she say, the whole thing was?
I think he says $300 for a comprehensive test.
Yeah, $300 for a comprehensive test. And what my concern is, somewhere along the line, we gotta, you know, you can't hold somebody's hand for life, but you also gotta protect people who, you know, who need to be protected. If you know, Union County is growing like crazy, and they punching holes in the ground, and I think it's a fact that when you disturb the ground, you can disturb the well structure. And is there any thought given by this committee on protecting people's wells? Or at least tell them, hey, if your well's contaminated, dude, you gotta get a filter or some kind of stuff, where they'd find out that they have a problem without saying, well, gee, I've gotta put my kid in an institution because he's got brain damage. I mean, you know, there's somewhere along there that I would like to see some safety for the citizen, yet I'm well aware of the fact that you can't spend $300 to test every well in this county. You know, once a year, you can't do that. So, that's why you're the administrator.
Well, you can see in here, I brought this slide up to show the voting, and, you know, Louis, you were on the infrastructure committee. Your committee voted 83%, which means, I guess, 5 out of 6 people that night voted in favor of the recommendation for well testing on existing homes. So your subcommittee, yes, did recommend that, but ultimately it was only supported by 3 of the 9 coordinating committee members. So it didn't make it in, and that's the result.
We talked about this the last time. I would ask that it be brought up with the chair and our other members here. This does not need to become another Flint, Michigan, where we let 83% say yes, and then the coordinating committee, if I understand it correctly, doesn't fully get behind it. And to me, that's setting a precedent that, and we don't want some big lawsuit. And I know y'all explained it last time, and I believe we asked that just please go take a look at it one more time. And am I correct in that, or am I not correct?
Good.
Okay. And I am with Louis on this and Jonathan. I think this is serious business, and I don't want to come back in 5 years, 10 years, and 15 years and say that on April 6th of 2021, we did not challenge what Louis is talking about. We really need to take a look at this, in my opinion, to the staff. And I welcome any disagreements that may be amongst the members that are here tonight.
No disagreement here, sir. I agree with you.
My recommendation on any of these, and we could certainly start with the well, is just to go point by point, especially based on the screen he's got, and discuss in greater detail. So I think the well would be a good place to start. I certainly don't disagree with either of you two. I guess on the one hand, I think about the tremendous cost involved. The other hand, you think about the risk.
There's no saying you pay me now or pay me later.
So things that Louis and I had discussed in the past, number one, irrigation. And we still, I don't believe, have got any clear answers, but when you drill a well, what proximity to another well do you drill where you run the risk of disturbing what you've already got? Point being, I wouldn't want my neighbor's irrigation to fracture rock that may taint my well. So there's a number of points here to discuss, and I think this is one of the most complicated issues on the docket.
Although I do have one little minor suggestion. Being a typical capitalist pig who's trying to make a buck, I'd be willing to bet you that these companies that will take a little violent test and send us the results have got a pretty hefty little markup on those tests. And if we do determine that there is some danger to the wells here, that the guy that requires some monitoring, I'm not at all sure our Board of Health couldn't acquire the testing, it's not that much for a drop of this in a liquid, I think. Acquire the ability to test, and then we do it ourselves, and rather than be $300, it might be, $82.50 or $21, who knows?
Well, what I will say,
And then we can say, well, I'm very comfortable, we'll test these wells, and if it's well contaminated, at least, a man has had a decision to make, you're well contaminated, sir, you're drinking stuff with arsenic or whatever, heavy metal in it, and he at least can take some action. What he doesn't know what's happening is what bothers me. That some poor guy thinks he's moving along nicely through life, and all of a sudden finally, he and his whole family are being poisoned. That's scary to me.
what this was presented as was a step at the land transfer phase. So if you lived in your home on a well for 40 years and you never had it tested, for 40 years, you wouldn't know. This would only be triggered, this well test would only be triggered if there was a land transfer, a sale. So that part of the transition is there'd now be a new step, which would require some enabling legislation in order to occur to say that Union County is, say, not going to file this deed with the Register of Deeds unless we have some signed form saying that the well results were received by the buyer.
Of course, the well results are not gonna make any difference until after the land has been disturbed. And it settles back down and see what.
Well, this is for existing homes. It already exists for new homes. The problem is they're out of order.
Is if I own this piece of property here, and I'm gonna sell for development, and Joe Blow living here, well, let's take it, raise wells, fine, no problem, and I go develop this thing, and we punch out a hole in the ground. By the time I'm through with my project, then is when his well becomes endangered, as I would see it. As, you know, if he did 40 years, got no problem, and I'm gonna sell my land for development, I would expect his well to be clean when I sell it. When it's developed, I expect a different answer.
I think that brings up,
Does that make sense?
yeah, that brings up a number of points. So first off, I think of the grandma who's widowed and living in her house to the point where she can't anymore, has to go into a home or assisted living, whatever the case may be, goes to sell, is mandated to test the well, and it comes back where there's an issue. Well, the value of her house dropped, and
She can't sell the house. and
she can't sell the
she's looking at
house.
that money for
So,
the
so there
retirement
is
home.
that component. There is a component, like you said, about wells in a vicinity being punched through and potentially contaminating existing wells. I
Is
do like the idea of the testing
any-
within the county.
Is there any specific, I'm trying to think, where you're allowed to put wells?
Yeah, I was
in-
just
in a-
asking Lee
in
about
like-
that.
In a neighborhood, like, back in the day, I mean, every house had a well, because that's what they relied on, was wells. But today, I mean, if they put developments and it doesn't perk, they have to put wells in, is there a specific amount of space between?
Well, you have to, I mean, you certainly need your setbacks from your septic fields.
100%.
Yeah, I know all about that.
And then you have from the property line, from the septic fields, it's many feet. From the property line, we think it's approximately 10 feet. So a lot less. And that's the limit. In terms of the.
But that's for you, what about, I'm talking about like for neighbors, like adjoining, house next to house next to house,
All
everybody's
of
gonna
them.
get a well.
All of them. That's something we look for when the sites are laid out for a subdivision that's going to be on well and septic is where are the repair areas, and then where's the well area, and is there the appropriate standoff distance between the two of them? But then you run, we run into a lot of our sins of our fathers with this situation in Weddington. Even with a lot of 1 acre lots, you still get some plumes of contamination, and you'll get.
Union County tells you where you can put the well and where you have to put your septic, or?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, the soil scientists are gonna tell us where it's possible to put the septic field. The well is just kind of the
Yeah.
remainder.
And they take into consideration existing wells and existing septic systems. So when they go out to site a septic system, they look at where the existing wells are. So where the neighbor's well's over here, this neighbor's well's over here, you've got to meet certain setback distances. So it ignores property lines. So that new septic system, you have to be a certain distance from your neighbor's well. When you drill the well on that property, you've got to be a
And
certain distance from all the septic.
It doesn't matter if
systems.
it's a well for drinking water, if it's a well for just irrigation.
Right.
It
Yeah,
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a well on my property, but it's just irrigation only.
Yeah, they changed the rules for irrigation a few years ago. It used to be that, if it was for irrigation purposes, you could kind of put it in some different places, but I think now they're a lot more strict for irrigation wells.
Let me ask a question of the board. Do you feel as though it would be advantageous to hear from someone with environmental health on this topic before we make any decision, any way, shape, or form in front of this board?
Funny you mentioned that. I was gonna recommend, what was that lady's name?
Is it Tracy?
Tracy.
I think Tracy, yeah, I think it was Tracy. But anyways, when you have someone in environmental health who gave us quite a bit of information, but I'm not a well expert by any stretch of imagination, but I would like to get her and a couple other people who are pretty knowledgeable and see if we can get some consensus of what's gonna be happening and what's a possible solution. To make sure we're not hurting our fellow citizens. My biggest concern is to hurt somebody who's using a well, and they think they have this little clam, and because of all of our progress we're making, we end up contaminating their well, and they don't know it. I think that's a moral thing I can't carry in my back. You get my drift?
Mr. Chairman, let me ask you a question. This will be to you and the staff. Does this person need to come before us, or does this person need to come before the board at their April meeting? We're just gonna kick this thing on down the road, and I personally am satisfied with where we are with the recommendations that have been made, and I fully, whatever this person tells us, they're gonna tell the board the same thing.
And honestly, she's going to say what we've said, which is that, we have a high incidence of these wells that are coming up with high levels of various contaminants. And it's a sufficiently important issue that it was evaluated through this process. It just didn't make it in because you had positives and negatives, and the coordinating committee ultimately thought that the negatives outweighed the positives.
Did this person speak to the committee?
Oh, yeah, several committees.
And I think that was part of I think that's why this issue came up. I know a couple of the committees asked for Tracy to come and speak. So she eventually, I believe, spoke to most of the committees,
Well-
subcommittees and the coordinating committee.
Well, plus also through the visioning process.
Yeah.
That was, safe drinking water was a frequent, probably one of the top 3 comments made from the public in the initial
Well,
round
I
of
think if this
feedback.
person speaks to the Board of Commissioners, when you get to that point, introduce that person, let them give a 10-minute, 5-minute comment as to why the things came out. You do the closing on it, because I don't want to, we need to get on with this thing, in my opinion. Y'all have worked diligently on this and done a beautiful job, as the chair has said, but I personally, if that person speaks to the Board of Commissioners, I'm happy.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, go ahead, Lee.
I was gonna say, I think one of the key takeaways I got from Tracy's presentation, Tracy Colling, her presentation was that Union County does have a lot of well contamination. Arsenic, manganese, there's some other things, but those are, I think, the two primaries. And a lot of it could be, it's all over the county, and a lot of it's naturally occurring, a lot of it's in our rock strata, so when that, it leaches into the water. Some of it may not be naturally occurring, but to try to figure out where it is, the more people that actually do testing, the more data they have to go by. But now it's sort of, it's voluntary. You want your well tested, you come in, you pay for it, they'll test your well, they'll tell you what's in it. So the coordinator, I forgot what committee came up with this idea, but one of the committees had the idea, okay, well, how do we get more people to test their wells? So you can't force somebody to test a well. I can't go tell you, you have to go test your well tomorrow. You just can't do that. But there are certain, time horizons where that may be appropriate. And one of those that the committee kind of keyed in on was the sale of a house. So when a sale of a house occurs, that might be a time for the new buyer to understand what's in that well. And that's why they came up with this program for, well testing on existing homes. Jonathan sells his house to me, I need to understand what's in that well. So it became part of the transaction. Flip side of that, the problem with that was state law doesn't currently allow you to do that. So this, if that program went into effect, there would have to be some legislation passed, which may happen if there's enough support. Legislation in Raleigh could be passed at the local level to allow Union County to do something like that.
So nobody can make just like a suggestion that, hey, you really should have your well checked?
You can, and that's been done.
I mean, like on a
Yes.
on our website or something like that or whatever?
That's been done. And
Now, what
Tracy-
what happens if, for argument's sake, two developments come in and they're just slammed with, what are they gonna do? Are they gonna, is the water company say, okay, we'll fix it, we'll run lines over there for you so you have water? I mean, what happens then?
If a well is contaminated, there are filtration systems that can be put on a well to filter out those contaminants. Now that's a long-term commitment, so it's not like you put this filter on today and it's going to work forever. I mean, it's just like having a fish tank. You got to replace the filter on it every so often, or your fish are going to die.
You do?
Yeah.
Yeah, I could speak to that. I have a friend that has his well tested positive for arsenic, and there's about a $500 device, gets you about 10 years roughly.
Yeah.
It's just a filter.
Yep.
But again, the responsibilities on.
Just the filter?
Just for the filter, well, it's a assembly, but yeah, you change out the filter, the bulk of the assembly cost is the filter.
So my previous house had arsenic in the water, and we had a water softener, and we also had a UV light underneath our house. And, it was our responsibility
Right.
to be sure that that light was constantly working. But as long as that light worked, our water was clean and fine.
And that's kind of where the grant program came in, was a solution to some of these issues. If you've got a concentration of wells that's close to an existing water line, maybe those folks could qualify for the short line extension program. Maybe there's a way water could be extended, but there are areas out in the county that aren't close to a water line, that water can't be extended. So how do you help those folks? That's where the idea of the grant program came in. Okay, well, we can't extend water right now. It may be years before we can get water out there. So in the interim, let's think about how we can help folks pay for some of those filtration systems or whatever it is. So those two things are kind of related. So it was, let's expand testing. And, you can do a voluntary test anytime you want. That information's out there. Tracy's done a lot of public education campaigns about that. But is there a way to sort of regulate when that can happen on an existing home? And, okay, so now we're regulating it. If there's a way to help people pay for that, that's where the grant program kind of came in. So those are kind of two issues, but that's, and those are sort of the pros and cons. You know, you gotta go out and get special legislation. And then some committee members just said, you know, that's not, let free market reign. Why should the government get involved in this real estate transaction? And then those are just the ideas of some of the committee members, so.
Well, I agree with the vice chair that this definitely deserves more attention, but at the same time, we owe it to the county to continue advancing this to the next level. My recommendation would be that Tracy or someone from the department be made available for the Board of Commissioners on that. In the meantime, I know there's two means that come to mind as far as promoting this. One would be advocacy. There's a number of ways, social media these days, you can get a lot of word out, doesn't cost the county a thing. The other thing would be free markets. As Louis alluded to, the cost is prohibitive, but if we had something within the county perhaps where we could get the testing done considerably less expensive for all inclusive, you know, someone looking at a $300 price tag versus something that might be closer to like $40, for example, which may be feasible by economies of scale. Maybe that'd be something that we look into pursuing, or at least bringing in front of the board to provide that option. Thoughts?
That is a good thought. And I believe like testing for arsenic is a pretty standard deal. Like, you know, whoever does it for Union County is probably the same one who does it for Las Vegas. Or the test of chemicals mixed this, that sort of thing. So I think it would be not difficult to find out how the test is done. And I know we have some people who are pretty bright around this county, determine as to whether we could pick up some of the testing if there's that much markup in it, we may do it ourselves. But I think the thing we should look at right now is I'd like to make a recommendation that we ask the county commissioners to look into this well system. And I know it kind of sounds like passing the buck, but they are in the public eye more than we are. I mean, God knows nobody's watching us.
I don't think it's
And-
passing
and
the buck, I
at
think
least
it's
they
taking
would give us-
responsibility. I mean, we like everything else except for that one, stipulation there. So they should know that we don't like that
Yeah.
part of it.
Mr. Chairman.
How did
Sure.
you know you had arsenic in your well?
Well, when we were closing on our house, I think the county checked the well, and it came back that there was something in it, and so we refused to close on our house until we were given something to have clean water.
A lot of banks actually require, so if you're getting a mortgage on a house, a lot of banks require you have that well test. They
Yeah, but I'm
want
just,
it.
I'm just saying, you're not selling your house or anything, it's just you're there and then all of a sudden you got, is your water taste funny or something?
Yeah,
One day you turn it on, it's like, damn, it
I'm
smells
sure
like
they're-
eggs or something, I
I'm
don't
sure
know.
their bank required that well test as part of the loan. So that's what happens.
I will say.
Right, I understand that, but I'm saying, like, people that aren't, they're not selling their house or anything,
Well, once we.
how do they
moved
know
into-
if their well is good or not?
Right.
Does it taste funny or something? I don't know, I don't know how it works.
Once we moved into our house, like when because I think that bulb, I mean, I can't remember now how expensive it was, but I mean, it's not like a bulb you go get at Walmart, it's special order. But if it had.
I have one on my
if it had
furnace.
been working for a little bit, you did kind of notice that the water had a different smell to it, so we would know to like go check and that it was time to get a new bulb.
Mr. Vice Chair, you had a question or comment?
I'd like to make a statement. There's no saying baptism by fire. We've had a good discussion on this tonight, Mr. Chair, and I think your initiation into the chair is that he be at this board meeting and express, hey, it happened to me.
Oh, my goodness.
Fraternity initiation time. No, all kidding aside, express the concern of the members of the board, which you can do extremely well, followed by the person, Tracy, was that their name?
Tracy Colley.
Followed by that.
So the perspective of the board is not to say specifically what should be done, but that nothing is probably a mistake and that this should be explored further.
Correct.
He's
And
the vo-
there-
he's the
there
voice
was
of the board.
something- There was something that seemed like it's sliding away from here. My concern is not so much if you were living out in the woods and you sink a well and you live your life that way. My concern was what contaminates these wells that is the serious roughing up of the land nearby. That's what
be.
I'm talking about. And that's where we are allowing the public to be endangered because we haven't developed it. If you live out in the woods by yourself, you got a well, or you live out in the woods by yourself and there's bears out there,
It
a bear
can
eat
be-
you, it can happen.
It could be subsidence of the rocks that changes the flow of the water table underneath so that it kind of releases a void of stagnant water that had accumulated the contaminants over a long period of time, and all of a sudden that comes in. It could be because your well shifted and all of a sudden you're getting contamination from a level of the subsurface that you shouldn't. It's no one thing. But the bottom line is, without the testing, you just don't know. And the land transfer we felt was or in this process was a useful trigger to head this off over a period of time.
There's no specific depth for wells, is there? I mean, wells are all,
It's all
as long as you hit a certain water, per gallon,
Yeah.
amount per gallon or something, so I mean, they could be 200 feet or they could be 450 feet.
yeah.
So
Well,
that's, when you say moving the ground, are you talking about digging wells, or are you just talking about like excavating?
Digging wells, putting in pipelines, water lines,
Disturbing the ground.
Yeah, putting in streets. A lot of things could be disturbing the ground. That, in my understanding, is that's what causes a significant amount of the change.
Would that disturb a well, though, like if you're putting in, I mean, if a well's at 250 feet,
I mean,
Well, it's about the casing.
Yeah.
You know, if you get disturbed at 50 feet, then all of a sudden you have contamination coming in at 50 feet.
Yeah, you have to, the way they construct wells is they case it, they line it, I mean, it's a pretty detailed process. But what I got from Tracy's presentation was there's really, again, like Bjorn said, there's really no one thing that causes the contamination. It very well could be, there's just natural arsenic
Natural causes,
in the rock that contaminates those wells. Or, it could be runoff from an industrial site. There could be a number of things. And then just the way the geology is below the surface is different across the entire county. So you might have one area that's a lot of rock, you got a lot of sort of like voids that have water in them. You might have other areas where you just go straight down and hit the water table. So it's just vastly different.
well, with Louis' concerns in mind, I reluctantly believe that Vice Chairman Fisher's comment probably is the correct course of action on this particular line item. In the interest of time, does anyone have anything to add on that particular item?
I've caused enough trouble already, thank you.
All right, well, if everyone's okay with this, I vote we just kind of go through this list that Bjorn has up on the screen one by one and see if we can't just knock out line items, and there may be 100% agreement or may be some discussion based on that. So the first item is current land use plan versus new use land plan.
Do you want me to go to the map?
I guess that depends on what the response of the board is. Do we need to, do we even need to discuss that, or are we all pretty much in agreement with the?
I sure have no problem with the current land use plan.
The current one or the one that's proposed?
proposed.
This one right here.
Okay, the proposed one.
Excuse me.
Yeah, it appears that everyone agrees except agriculture, and I kind of see what, I understand, they don't want houses where you got farms. That's natural to me, okay, I think that's fine, personally.
Our next line item, updating regulations versus regulations plus new programs. The advancement scenario by a pretty good majority moves forward. Does everyone agree with that? Any objections, I guess, should be the better question.
No objection.
All right, increased stormwater requirements. Again, the majority agrees. Any discussion or disagreement? All right, well testing on new homes, we've delved into that.
Yeah, we have plenty.
Cluster allowances where water and sewer present. I see where that is allowed by a slight majority. Any discussion?
Does anybody need an explanation on what it means, or, I think Bjorn went through it maybe quickly, but.
Yeah, what this, I mean, we already have cluster allowances that you could do on a hypothetical 100-acre tract that's zoned R40. You could go down to an R20 half-acre lot essentially and keep the remainder as undeveloped. Even the R20 for a lot of development these days is seen as too large of a lot. And what this does is in areas that are agricultural in the land use plan. So I'm going to pull up the map to show you an example. Say you have water and sewer down here south of Mineral Springs. For some reason, there's a water and sewer line in that area. So previously, we would have said, the tail would have wagged the dog, and we would have had that area designated as yellow, say, well, there's utilities in the area, so we should have it as single-family residential. When in actuality, we really want that area to remain rural and agricultural. So those water and sewer lines are still there. So what this would do is, as a by right development, if you had that 100-acre parcel, you could do your hypothetical 100 lots and do them on 25 acres. If you wanted to do 4 units per acre, you could do that in exchange for keeping the rest of the land undeveloped, and you would have enhanced setbacks off of streams and wetlands, maybe enhanced setback from the road. So you didn't even see houses for like 100 yards, and it was forested, and you didn't see anything. So the developers were able to build what the market truly wanted, not just the 20,000, which may or may not be what the market wants in that area. The county gets less infrastructure to maintain because presumably they had to run less pipes to serve those homes. And from an environmental and a rural character perspective, we preserved more of the undeveloped land, and it didn't have to go through a rezoning process, which is more attractive to the developers. So this is really just a continuation of a policy that already exists in the zoning ordinance and just gives it more flexibility. It's not any more units, it just gives the property owners more flexibility in exchange for not having the ability to upzone for more lots.
Any discussion?
Yeah,
Objections?
I like that. The reason we want to try to keep the growth down some is to maintain the character of our county compared to next door, where you have a big city. And, and how they do it is pretty much immaterial. If you're still averaging 1 house per acre, as opposed to 7 houses per acre in the city, it's a different story. So I think it's fine. That's fine.
It is kind of interesting that we found, just kind of when the committee directed us to research this, we found a couple of subdivisions in other counties that had rules similar to this, that the HOA would actually, because they had so much common open space, would end up leasing that common area back to a farmer, so that common area actually stayed in agricultural production. And it also helped out the HOA by helping them, they got low income off of it. Kind of a neat sidebar.
Very good.
Some of them go into a forestry
Yeah,
also.
that's right.
Or dedicated to a land conservancy.
Next line item, increased open space requirements for developments in rural areas. Looks like the vast majority was in favor of that. Discussion, objections? All right, school siting requirements. And this one's a little odd. Bjorn, do you care to elaborate on this one for us?
Sure, right now, in Union County, you can put a school on any piece of property, regardless of the zoning. And when Union County Public Schools was pretty much the only school system building schools, they were building them according to the state standards, very rigorous process, expensive process, but you resulted in properties that typically had multiple points of access, sufficient land to store the stacking of the vehicles as people were getting picked up and dropped off, and appropriate traffic mitigation. The cap on charter schools was lifted in the last couple of years, and we've seen an explosion of charter schools. There's also been a few private schools, and some schools have gone in on less than optimal pieces of land where there weren't road improvements made or made in time, and they didn't have multiple points of access. They didn't have your typical amounts of buffering you would see against adjacent development, and potentially, this hasn't happened yet, but it's a potential downside, is that they could go into, say, an industrial park or near an industrial park and scare off tenants from there because the industrial tenants don't want to be next to a school and have that real or perceived liability. So what this would do is put in some performance standards for access points, for buffering from industrial uses, sufficient buffer yards for lighting for athletic fields, things like that. They would be less than Union County standards. So from Union County Public School standards, they would exceed this by automatic in terms of their performance standards that they use. But for the private charter schools that we have seen, some of the parcels that were previously selected probably wouldn't receive this special use permit or conditional zoning, whatever tool is used to enforce this, in order to keep just the obvious bad situations from occurring.
Thank you. Any discussion or objections to that item? Very good. Moving on, transition zones for donut areas. Again, the vast majority has approved.
Yeah, that's a good idea to do that, yeah, I go along with that.
Moving along, well, we're going to go past the two well items.
Leave that alone.
Establishing a rural water authority. This one, again, there's pretty much pretty vast majority, but I know there were some concerns. Bjorn, do you mind getting into some of the concerns that were raised?
The Rural Water Authority is a model, an example from Stanley County that was proposed as a way to create a real or virtual, I'm not sure how hard the boundaries really are, in terms of saying that a portion, pretty much in the east and southern parts of the county, that need short line water extensions, are intended for short line water extensions due to unsafe drinking water. We don't have the money to do as many as we would like. By having a rural water authority where the demographics are lower, the density is less, the income is less, it can make that organization eligible for more state and federal grants in order to run those lines just for taking people off of wells, not sufficient capacity to support massive subdivision type development. And the concern was that the county commission would be ceding some authority to another board. And I honestly can't say whether that is a real or hypothetical concern or liability of such an organization.
I think there was some concern too about that maybe the amount of grant money that used to be available wasn't available anymore, that a lot of this stuff was funded through low interest loans, things like that.
Any discussion, objections to the recommendations of the committees?
It seems like that committee would have a responsibility. We're talking about the water. If they promote wells, they gotta make sure there's good wells. I don't see a problem with it. That's
Very good.
It's a mechanism for getting some grant money to utilize part of our unused land.
The next item, funding for recreation projects through quarter-cent sales tax. While there is a 56% slight majority, my understanding is Anything that was in the yellow or red was not recommended to move forward, is that correct?
That's correct.
So we're looking on this item as recommending not to move forward with that one. Any discussion or objections?
I agree, but don't move forward on that one. I wouldn't recommend it.
Very good. Moving to the next one. Funding for transportation projects through quarter-cent sales tax. This one was very narrowly approved through the coordinating committee, had more support through the other committees. Any discussion or objections?
What kind of transportation are we looking at here? Getting people to work?
No, this would be Union County contributing funds in partnership with the DOT and municipalities and potentially private developers to improve intersections or potentially help get segments of roads widened faster. I couldn't imagine a scenario where Union County would pay for a project completely on its own, but it would help us grow the pot, so to speak, to improve intersections and segments of roads.
Okay, so the only revenue that would go toward this is our sales tax revenue?
Well, from a county perspective, yes.
Yeah.
So whatever it generates, it's almost like an enterprise fund. Whatever it generates would be dedicated to that activity. And as much as possible, it would be partnered up against municipal, DOT, and private developer funds.
Well, private developers, if you want to develop a place, you got to, I've been on boards of adjustment and watched people like Food Lion wanting to build a shopping center. They know what they got to do about the roads, who turning in and out of the darn thing. Private development is going to do what it takes, otherwise they can't sell stuff. So they'll do it regardless. The question is what is the government agencies going to do? They have less responsibility. They don't have to produce a profit.
So I've got a few concerns on this, if no one else needs to
You
speak
talk about
initially.
traffic too, yeah.
So the first concern is that the quarter-cent sales tax, while it would be initially to fund transportation projects, any board of commission at any time could reallocate those funds at their choosing. The other concern is my personal experience with the North Carolina Department of Transportation. They move on their schedule with what they deem to be important. So even if you say, I've got $120 million for these projects, we'd like to do these traffic circles and this and that, the funds may be there and they could just say, well, no, that's not a priority, we'll get to you when we get to you. And you talk about citing schedules, look no further than Highway 16, and it's been coming this year, no next year, and now I'm hearing maybe 2030. So I have hesitation on this one for the what ifs. I think it's a great concept. I think there's no way to hold anyone's feet to the fire. And I personally feel like we're going to be stuck with a quarter-cent sales tax that we're really not going to see a return on investment.
I agree. I mean, it's like DOT, they can just allocate the money wherever they want, what they deem is more important.
Well, certainly, I'm a firm believer that the government will find a way to need that money and find a place. They gotta spend it. You gotta do this right away. So I'm really down on increased taxes all the time. We pay a lot of taxes already, and we manage to have a decent civilization. I would say just recommend that.
Vice Chair Fisher?
I know what we've been through in Waxhaw, and we needed to have something in our pocket to make something happen. It's hard to say. I mean, we see what the federal government does a lot of times. They take rob Peter to pay Paul. I would hope our commissioners would not do something like that. But I probably have just no comment on it.
Okay, so it seems like 3 out of 4 are against that, and the 4th has no comment. It should be noted, however, the majority of the committees were in favor of this. is the official consensus for 3 out of 4 to disrecommend? All right, that should be noted that we're disrecommending the quarter-cent sales tax for transportation projects. Establishing a litter task force. Everyone in agreement?
Absolutely, yes.
Funding for broadband internet expansion programs. And I think this applies mainly to rural areas, does it not, Bjorn?
Initially it was, and then COVID really took hold, and I think we realized that it wasn't just the farmers in the rural areas, it was pretty much everyone everywhere. And Monroe noted that there are parts of town that are older, and they've got broadband access issues as well. So we took that rural and agricultural focus off of it and just kind of said, where it's slow, it needs to be faster, and
Right.
left it at that.
Recommendation is to approve by a vast majority. Anyone, any discussion, disagreement?
I definitely want to approve, I'll definitely approve that also.
I'm for it.
Good. Last item on this page, supporting proactive water sewer extensions to assist municipal planning efforts. Overwhelming majority said no, they do not support
Yes.
this. Especially with the coordinating committee, the Citizens, Environmental, and Business Development were strongly in favor of this, it should be noted. Any discussion or objections to the coordinating committee's recommendation to disapprove?
Do we know how much water we've sold to Charlotte-Mecklenburg County?
I have no idea.
Okay, thank you.
In the raw or processed sense?
Pardon?
In the raw or processed sense?
Processed.
I don't know.
It might even be interesting to know the raw, but I've had several people ask me that, and I didn't know the answer to it.
We can find out. I mean, I don't have the answer today, but we can.
Maybe you can put that down as to find out, and they come up, if this board is in agreement, in the staff's comments at the May meeting.
Now, this particular line item is to support municipal planning efforts. And Bjorn, correct me if I'm incorrect, this would be, say, for example, if Waxhaw said, hey, we really need capacity for another 10,000 units, could the county pay for part of this infrastructure improvement?
I don't think residential's the emphasis. I think it's about downtown, which may involve some residential, but it's about a downtown or potentially an industrial park or an office park. I think those are the types of uses. You know, it's strengthening their downtowns, strengthening economic development efforts.
Now, that would be a different story, but what I would see, I would like to see some, especially industrial. What I don't want to see is all the cities we have, oh, I can do this, I can develop more land. Because they believe growth for the sake of growth is a good deal. And it's not necessarily great just to be growth. There's a quality of life that you'd be looking for. But however, if we were getting industrial, then you're creating jobs. And then instead of people commuting all the way back to Charlotte to go to work, they would be creating jobs locally, and we would be a self-sustained area. So I would definitely be strongly supporting money for industry, for sure. Water sewer for industry,
Is there
or anything.
Is there any way, if say we did vote to assist municipal planning efforts, is there any way to guarantee that this would only apply to efforts that would essentially create jobs? Or could it just be tied or applied to any particular area?
We're not supposed to play favorites with customers, so that's really hard to do. I know the Board of Commissioners are really struggling with that, about essentially allocating capacity to a municipality, which, you know, if they buy the capacity in advance, what's the problem? But apparently that is a problem. So things that make sense like that are fundamentally not okay.
And that's
Okay,
been-
so-
And Jonathan, that's been a question that
the board has struggled with, the board, like Bjorn said, for years, they've talked about, is there a way that we can allocate it just to industrial or commercial and not residential? In fact, the concern over this item that the Ag Committee had wasn't to support downtown development or industrial parks. They were all for that. Their concern was exactly what you're talking about. Well, if I've got to upsize a water line for 2 miles to get to that downtown, can I prevent a residential developer from tapping onto that line once it's done? And the answer was no, you can't. And I think that was the concern that a lot of the people.
Well, it sounds like to me, the current rules in place, unfortunately, Louis' recommendation is just not a realistic option.
It was a shot.
And I do agree with him 100%, but
Yeah, if it can't be done, it can't be done. I understand what
So-
you're saying there, and it does make, I can see being in government, you can't let us, we can't be little dictators here.
so it's a vote to go with the coordinating committee and disapprove that particular line item?
Yeah, let's disapprove it.
Vice Chairman Fisher?
Well, based on this right here, it is disapproved.
Yes, sir.
So you want to reverse it?
No.
No.
Or you want to keep
We're
it?
just making sure we're all in agreement.
Yeah.
Very good.
Should-
All
Can I ask a kind of a clarifying question?
Absolutely.
Should there be it kind of heard the boards, just listening to the board's discussion, it kind of sounded like you were kind of on the same page as a lot of the other committees in that if there was a way to allocate capacity, then you might be for this. If you could say, this capacity is reserved just for industrial or business development, then you might be okay. But the concern is
Yeah.
that, you know,
Again, I am completely in favor with Louis' proposal, but again, that would be provided that this only could go toward job-creating measures. And by job-creating measures, I don't mean the guys building a house for 4 months. I'm talking about good, sustainable jobs that benefit the county. Any further discussion? Do we want to approve with conditions? Do we want to continue the recommendation of disapproval?
Of the whole list or what?
No, of just this particular item.
I think I'd vote to disapprove. I'll go with the.
To your point, Lee, I like the concept, but I know the way the rules work, and I think I don't see how that would change. I wish it would, I don't see it happening. All right, on this particular page then, the well items we're addressing via Vice Chairman Fisher's recommendation, and we're agreeing with the coordinating committee on all items except for the 1/4 cent sales tax for transportation. Bjorn, could you please go to the next screen?
Sure.
5. Expand transition zones, even more to take in nearly all land between municipalities in Western Union County. And the coordinating committee reaffirmed this. Any discussion or disagreement with the coordinating committee's findings? All right, looks like we're in agreement with the coordinating committee on that one. Enact a policy to deny rezonings that add traffic until funded, and that's the key portion of that. Funded road projects are completed. So if there's been a road project that is identified, and Bjorn, you may need to clarify, if it's been identified but not funded, that would not apply. It would have to
That's
be a
correct.
funded project.
That's correct.
And the coordinating committee supports denying rezonings that add peak hour traffic such as residential. As Bjorn had stated earlier, his concerns, or I guess the concerns of the coordinating committee, fell to things like daycare and potential other items such as commercial or industrial that may not add to the peak traffic demand. Any discussion on that one? This is a biggie, in my opinion. My stance on it would be to deny residential rezonings, but any type of a business use, I feel as though should be taken into consideration, with the exception of maybe charter schools, but that is also addressed via another line item. Personally, I like shopping centers that are within the county, because not only the county receives the tax benefits from sales tax, but also people are not driving in and out of Charlotte. They're spending less time on the roads and getting to local restaurants and grocery stores and things like that. So, any further discussion? My recommendation would be to go with the coordinating committee's position on supporting denying rezonings on residential items, but allowing commercial rezoning requests.
Well, we didn't,
Any type of-
if I could, we drew that distinction about the type of traffic they generate and not the land uses, because just like the sewer allocation on one type and not another could make you liable in a lawsuit, same type of discrimination could occur here. So it's not about the land use in this instance, it's about the impact.
How would you effectively define that as far as add peak hour traffic? Would you just say, well, my case in point, I hear a number of arguments from these, the developers doing the age restricted, where one of their selling points is, oh, these aren't peak hour. This isn't a peak hour community. These people don't have jobs to get to, which again, 55 is not that old.
Well, in that instance, we've put our counters out on the few age-restricted or age-targeted neighborhoods we have here, and the numbers bear it out. Compared to a single-family neighborhood, one of those age-restricted neighborhoods is about half the traffic on a per-unit basis, and the peak hour impact is a little bit higher than that type of reduction. So we're going to have to set a number. We're going to have to say, X percent of your traffic you can't be any higher than that in the peak hour. It's going to have to get set. Like a month ago, I came up here and gave a presentation that went down in flames regarding a recommendation of approval for that apartment complex at Newtown and Providence. And one of the points I made is that the amount of traffic it was generating, the percent that was in the peak hour, was about a third less than a comparable amount of traffic generated by a single-family neighborhood. And I said, that's a good thing. And that's why even though 16's bad, this is better than that alternative. And that's the type of distinction we would have to make. Of course, any kind of business that's on 16, any kind of land use that's on 16 is going to put some traffic in the peak hour on 16. It's a question of how much. None of these are without downsides. It's a matter of pluses and minuses, and what's the accounting? What's the net positive or net negative?
So it should also be highlighted that this is only to apply for funded projects such as 16.
It would also apply for funded intersection projects as well.
Sure, any kind of funded road project. So I guess I'll ask those who frequent roads like 16 where you do have a funded project, would you even want any additional commercial along that corridor at this time?
There's been some that's been approved, and there's been some that's been turned down. So it depends on what it is and where it is. Marvin, if I'm not mistaken, I think where that,
Produce,
what?
produce stand on 16.
No, it's where the fruit stand is, all that land back in there.
Oh, the root farm.
Who owns that?
That's Weddington.
Pardon?
It's Weddington. Well, it's in the town of Weddington.
It's the root farm.
Yeah, yeah, the Bissell proposal.
Bissell, yeah, the Bissell, that was turned down, wasn't it?
I don't even know if it was turned down. It just, that they saw the writing on the wall and they went away as well.
Okay,
They're building something. in there.
so I think it just
They
depends on
cleared out,
what it is and where it
they
is.
just logged it.
They got like big, huge house, white house, and now they build a big barn in front of it.
So
It's huge.
Bjorn, on this item, just for instance, should there be any kind of, say there's a development on 16 where it's age restricted and it falls into the category of not adding peak hour traffic, the only thing that this would do is instead of flat out saying, no, you can't do it, then it would then come to the board, correct? And then,
Well, if the policy was to deny it, then they still have a right to apply.
but would it come before the board?
Oh, absolutely, because we can't deny them the opportunity. It's just that they would know the writing on the wall in terms of the policy is to turn them down in situations that say X, Y, and Z. And we'd have to determine what ratio of peak hour. Like, for example, single family, the rule of thumb is 10% of traffic from a single family neighborhood, so 100 homes, 10 trips per home, so 1,000 trips per day, 10% occur in the PM peak hour, which is 5 to 6 PM. So you can expect 100 trips. What satisfies us? Is it 5% of the traffic is in the peak hour? I don't know. We're gonna have to come up with something, and that will be our, we're gonna have to calibrate it to say what is acceptable and what's not, because it's not gonna be zero. There's no land uses that don't generate traffic in the peak hour. It just doesn't make sense. So what ratio is acceptable? If 10's too high, is 5 okay? I don't know.
Well, given all the discussion, I would agree with the coordinating committee. This project would still come before the board, and they'd still come before the commissioners, and I recommend going with their decision here. Does anyone disagree with that?
No, sir. Let the county commissioners handle it.
I agree.
All right, well, sorry to drag that one out. We agree with the coordinating committee on that. Next line item, eliminate all multi-family land uses from the land use map in Western Union County. And the initial response that was reaffirmed was coordinating committee felt the new land use map already significantly reduces the amount of land to use for such uses and limited to key intersections along current future multi-lane roads. Such development would not be supported until road widenings are complete. However, do you disagree with the coordinating committee's stance on that?
No, I agree with them. This, Western Union County is high density already. You start putting multifamily housing up there, it's gonna get just, I think, a little ridiculous. And it looks like everybody pretty much agrees. You're agreeing across the board.
They're agreeing, but they're not eliminating the multi-use. They're just saying that they're discouraging it. And there are a few key areas that are highlighted, town centers and corridors, high traffic corridors, correct?
That's correct. I can pull up the map. In this instance, you're looking at the areas in orange and you're looking at the dark orange
Yeah.
dots. That's Ray and Tom Short. If you were to propose some townhomes at that intersection by the Coles, that would be consistent with that node. If you're looking down at Newtown and Providence, where we had an apartment complex proposed right here, where it's orange, that's consistent. On the north side of there, on the west side of Providence, that would be consistent. We just approved this. This was the hybrid townhomes and age, I can't remember if it was restricted or targeted. I think it's restricted. On the south side of
Cuthbertson.
Cuthbertson. That's right there. So we've already been doing these things. The current plan that we're replacing, pretty much this whole area here, everywhere between Wesley Chapel and Monroe was all orange. We have reduced, and same with some areas up here, the amount of land that was orange, which is, townhomes, apartments, small lot, single family, things like that, has been reduced from 25,000 acres to less than 1,000, but not a lot less than 1,000. So is 1,000 a lot? Yeah, but 25,000 was a lot more. So that's the perspective here.
That one on Tom Short and Ray Road, is that where the Walmart was supposed to go?
Yes,
What's the one on the other side of the street? They have townhomes in there now.
that was,
They're building.
that was rezoned probably 3 years ago.
It's right, like right on the border.
Yeah, right on the border, on the southwest side of Ray Road.
Yeah, you got the ice cream store.
Yeah, right by Andy's.
Strip mall, and right next to that strip
That's
mall.
right. First townhomes, I believe, that Union County approved.
So it should be noted that, for example, the apartments, even though they would be congruent with the land use, the 2050 land use map, the gotcha on that one would be the fact that you have a funded project that's not completed.
That's right.
With
It
that
would,
being,
it would hold it up for 8-9 years.
that's optimistic with the DOT.
That project, to say 2030, that's completion. I mean, it is, there's money still being spent on it right now.
Okay, well, with those nodes in mind, the coordinating committee has voted to recommend denying pretty much any multifamily other than those nodes. Do you agree with that, or is there any discussion?
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that.
Great.
Very good. I think we got one more item there.
Yes,
Using proposed quarter-cent sales tax to pay for.
you took care of that one.
Yeah, I think we addressed that. Do you
Yeah.
even want me to waste my breath on that?
No.
Yeah.
Well, very good. There's only one item that has not been brought up in any of this that you guys may feel is appropriate, maybe not, especially in light of the recent issue. I don't know if you're aware of the pit bull attack on the horse, and I believe there's another individual at Cane Creek Park.
No,
There,
no.
I don't know.
Yeah, I saw it in the news. I didn't know where it happened.
Yeah, at Cane Creek Park, there's a horse, I guess, being used for carriage, and a pit bull attacked it. I guess it broke free from its leash, or broke the leash maybe, and then attacked the horse as well as the, I guess, the operator of the horse who was trying to stop that situation from happening. I've had recommendations from just citizens that have requested a establishment of a board for just animal, like an animal advisory committee, just to advise the county, the commissioners on issues related to animal welfare and regulations, things like that, just to give a citizen's perspective. And with that coming to light as of late, I felt like that may be something we want to add on to this. But again, I may be speaking completely out of turn on this. Just wanted to get your thoughts.
Most townships, like Waxhaw, Stallings, they've got laws. Also, my wife is, when she worked as a commercial underwriter, and you, as a pit bull owner, have a responsibility to tell the insurance company that you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, you breed them, whatever the case may be.
Cane Creek Park, that's a county park, correct?
Yes, it is.
Correct.
So this would apply in this instance where maybe a municipality wouldn't.
Well, I think what you gotta look at is what does animal control of the county do? What are their laws, rules, and regulations? We
Well,
need to know that before we can recommend it.
sure. Well,
Is it by town now? I mean, each town has its own, like Weddington has a leash law.
yeah, well, again, this is just this would be a board that makes recommendations to the county on what their laws should be. Just my 2 cents.
I tell you what, I'm a friend, I have animals. I have a German Shepherd, and I don't have a leash. My dog obeys commands. But I have noticed throughout my life, I've always had animals. And I've noticed people have got a dog, next to, tied to a tree with a little 4-foot rope around his damn neck. You wonder why when he gets loose, he wants to kill something. I understand why he does that. The people, if anybody who knows how to handle an animal, can have an animal be a loving animal, he'll protect you if necessary, but other than that, he's a very loving animal. That's the nature of dogs. I've had them my whole life. but I have seen other people who abuse dogs, and those dogs are usually pretty mean dogs. I don't know what a committee could do, because you can't change stupidity, and that's what some people have, and I don't think you can help with that. That's what animal control needs to go over there,
right.
and bring smoke on them mostly,
These people that you're talking about, they need to go to animal control
yeah.
and let animal control tell them what they're doing. And then, I don't know that it's our responsibility to come back, or if it's animal control to go to the commissioners and say, hey, we need help with this type of situation.
Very good. Well, noted. All right, well, with that being
We gotta
said,
get you a dog, man.
I'm a dog.
I tried you too.
I do.
He's got snakes and frogs.
I've got everything. All right, well, with that being said, are there any more comments on item number 6? All right, we'll close that one out. Item number 7, planning staff report.
Just a minute, so what is our, on item number 6, what is our recommendation? We need to approve what
Sure.
we recommended, don't we?
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. Item number 6, I believe we had noted the line items where we had agreed, the items where we disagreed, and then the well issue, which was to be addressed via Vice Chairman recommendation. So with that being said, based on our previous comments, and I could go back through the whole thing, but I don't think in the interest of time, unless we need to procedurally, all in favor of,
We need to approve a motion to approve, or just?
a motion for
As, with changes as recommended.
as recommended, as noted. Thanks for keeping me in line. Any motion? Louis, second. All in favor?
All right.
All righty.
Thank you for the
Thank you.
feedback.
All right, item number 7, planning staff report.
Really, the only items are just to report back that the text amendment that came to the board, 2 text amendments that came to the board at the last meeting. One was the 160D amendments, state required amendments that were reluctantly recommended. Those will go for a public hearing this coming Monday before the Board of Commissioners. And the buffer floodplain defining density amendment that also came that same night was approved at the last Board of Commissioners meeting. So that is effective now. The other item that came before the board was the Avington Apartments rezoning, and that was withdrawn by the applicant. So that did not go to the Board of Commissioners, but since it was withdrawn after it came to the planning board, there'll have to be a year waiting period before another rezoning application can be filed for that property.
Profits really won't be going right now, so.
Very good. That closes out item number 7, I believe. You're good?
Yep.
Thank you, Lee. Item number 8, brief comments. Pat?
I just want to thank Bjorn for all of the work that he did on this. It was very intense.
County thanks me every other week. I'm happy to do it. The county thanks me every other week.
Louis?
I think y'all have heard as much from me as you want to.
Vice Chairman Fisher?
I want to reaffirm what Pat said and what Chairman Thomas said. Bjorn, you, the team that put everything together, the presentation, outstanding. Thank you, beyond thank you. That's one. And then second, if we could get on the website, because of the changes, the last 2 or 3 meetings, we've had quite a few people come up and speak from the public. So I'm requesting that that be done tomorrow so the emails can go to Jonathan.
Oh, my goodness.
Hello.
Oh, my goodness, you're just trying to stick it to me tonight. All right, well, my only comments are, again, thank you, Bjorn, for all your hard work. That cannot be overstated. And please all bear with me. I've got some homework as far as procedural items, and I'll try to do a better job. I was a little blindsided this evening, but I promise I'll do better, so please bear with me. That being said, close out item number 8. Item number 9, motion to adjourn. Do we have one?
Motion.
Vice Chairman Fisher,
I'll second that.
second. All in favor?
Aye.
You're staying? All right.
That's an affirmative vote.
This meeting lasted long enough that I missed an 8 o'clock.